Hello and welcome. In this video session, I'm going to show you advanced techniques for search engine optimization of a Shopify store. In the previous video session, I've shown great tips and insights for SEO, which also stands for search engine optimization. So if you haven't watched that video, which is perhaps non-technical, that means any Shopify store owner can use to improve their website's result. But in this video session, we're going to dive deeper to see what else we can do optimizing a Shopify store. This video session will be technical. That means you should be at least familiar with the way Shopify template system works. It's called Liquid, and also conditional flow of Liquid as well. I'll make the links available in the video description. So search engine optimization in 2024 will be drastically different because Google is making major changes. Also, if your Shopify store is using Google Search Console, then the insights that I will share with you will actually improve Core Web Vitals as well, okay? So we'll take a look at a sample e-commerce store built on Shopify, as well as the test site that I've created particularly for this video session. We're going to explore the theme itself. So let's dive right into it. Let's take a look. Obviously, we can duplicate the theme. Instead of working on the live theme, we can make changes to the code and then publish that. That means we don't want to work on a live site. So since it's a technical video session, I will assume that you actually know what's going on here when we see this. So this is a typical theme layout. We've got the theme Liquid that calls the entire HTML, whereby within it, as we can see, there's CSS, there's some head scripts, canonical URL declaration, we've got the title element here, meta description comes from here, and so on, right? So then what we can do in terms of Shopify SEO is take a look at the scripts first. Although they are using defer, resource hint, it doesn't really make a huge difference because there's 3 HTTP requests to 3 different files. Now, where do these come from? They come from your assets folder here, right? So we've got the constant.js, so that's being called. We've got global.js, what's that called from the theme Liquid? Yes. Then we've got the pub/sub. Then we also have animation, but that has a if condition. So now what we can do, we know these are called. Although they're deferred, we want to reduce the HTTP requests. So what we can do is, let's take a look at the source code by pressing on Ctrl-U on our keyboard. Now we've opened 3 different files, which are these, right? And we know where they come from. So I tend to work like this because it makes it much easier for myself. But I could have easily copied the JS from here. Now another reason that I tend to do this is because now I know the order in which these JavaScripts are loaded, because that makes a difference for certain type of JavaScript files. So now I know this called first, then this, then this. That means this is first, constant, pub/sub, this. So what we can do, let's copy these. Let's work on our local computer. If you're using Notepad++, that's okay. If you're using Dreamweaver, even better. So let's just copy all these files So we're looking at 3 different JavaScripts. Let's copy all, paste that in there. Right, so let's save that locally first. Let's say 3 group JS files.js. Let's save it as JavaScript. Now let's do something like this. As you can see, we've got comments here. Let's copy everything. Let's go online. Search for Minify.js. There is great tools available for free to minify the JavaScript. Okay, some of them work slow, some of them work fast. Here I can copy to clipboard. Now, what happened? We've grouped 3 files, JavaScript files, and we minified them. Okay, then let's save this and let's call it as 3 group JS files -min, so we know it's minified. So now what we can do is go back to our assets folder and create a new asset. We can, if we want, upload the minified version. Let's do that. Let's actually do that. Okay. Let's add new asset. Keep in mind, you can actually create JavaScript files, blank file. You can create CSS file. You can create JS liquid file, and so on, okay? So now we've got 3 files. What do we do with them? Well, since we know these 3 scripts are called, we can actually remove that if we want. In fact, if you're a web developer, then you want to remove it. You don't want to have comments or chunks of code which are not used. Right, so then instead of calling that coming from assets URL, there's an asset URL, instead of calling 3, let's just call 1. Which one? The one we've uploaded, which was the minified version. So I can copy the name so it's quicker. There we go. Now, 3 HTTP requests. Now just 1. So now we can continue doing that. Looking at the scripts throughout our theme liquid file. We can look at let's look at templates. Actually, not templates. Let's look at sections. We've got header liquid. Now let's take a look at, there's some CSS files here, as we can see, but they are already optimized, which is great. So that's a good thing. Whoever is doing this, that's a very smart optimization technique, because they're changing the print, which isn't loaded when the page loads, but when the page loads, it becomes media all. So they are very smart. This is very smart optimization technique. I actually use this for one of my valued clients' websites. Let's say Google. We've done it for Google Fonts. As we can see, we're using that technique. But we're also using display swap, which obviously is better. That's why you want to learn from Rankia, because I show you things where other people cannot. Okay. Alright, let's take a look. What else we can do? JavaScript for Shopify store, you can group them together. But surely we can dive a little bit deeper into JavaScript optimization. But I won't cover that, because that is too technical. Because if you know how to do that, then you wouldn't be watching this video session. Most likely. Okay. So we've got header liquid, page liquid. Now let's take a look what's going on here. There's some CSS rules. Let's take a look at, where are we? Footer. Sometimes, okay, let me show you another trick. Remember, with certain JavaScript files from Theme Liquid, although they're deferred, and if they're deferred, because we've deferred it, right? Well, then we don't really have to have it in the head portion if we don't want. Surely we need to test things like this to see, you know what, is that JavaScript required in the head portion? Because now if I remove that and place it in sections, footer liquid, and I can actually do something like this. Let's say that's footer div, that's footer. But you know what, let's go back to Theme Liquid. I don't want to modify the footer section. So before the closing of body tag, we can place the script there. So everything else loads first. So it's a little bit more faster sometimes. Then I can save the file. Okay, so that's another optimization technique. What else can we do? We can identify the CSS that's being called as well and follow the same structure. So let's do that. Let's do CSS to see which CSS files are loaded. As you can see, sometimes we've got the app CSS, which we cannot touch perhaps because it's coming from the app. Only an app developer can optimize their code. That's why you want to triple check the apps that is being used on a Shopify store. But as we can see, we've got base CSS, we've got component predictive CSS. Let's take a look at that. Got the base CSS, and we've got all this version control as well, right? So we can follow the same technique that we've done for JavaScript, but do the same thing for CSS. Let's call that, let's say, to grouped .css. So now let's make some room, because I've seen a different, that's font, that's the predictive search. Let me remove the version control. Let's copy the CSS and place that in there. Right, so that's the CSS optimization. Let's save the file. Surely we can remove the comments. We can even minify the CSS as well. Okay, but that's a source map. That may be needed because it's Shopify, so let's leave that in there. Or it may not be. You need to then triple check that. Okay, now let's do the same thing. Let's go to assets, because those CSS files are coming from here. As we can see, it's base CSS and also component something it was. What was it? Component predictive search. That's called. That's CSS, right? So we know where they are now. But let's add a new asset. This time let's create a CSS file. And let's call the file toGroukedCSS. Let's do it like this. toGroup. Well, .css is automatically assigned here. Let's save. So now we've got another file in the assets section, which is toGroukedCSS, right? So now let's highlight everything and paste it in there. Let's save changes. So basically what we're doing here is we're identifying the JavaScript files and we're identifying the CSS files, particularly the ones in the head portion. And then what we need to do is obviously modify the loading of those files. So let's identify that base CSS. As we can see, that's coming from there. And there was another one, predictive search. Okay, which was this here. Although they're using print on load in this example, perhaps we can even leave that in place. But for the sake of this tutorial, let's actually... Okay, that's a bit tricky because there's an if condition, right? So I wouldn't do that. I'm just showing you that I had to group two CSS files. So instead of calling two different ones, we're now calling just one, which was named as toGroup CSS, which was this one here, right? So then let's name it toGroup.css. Let's save changes. So we're working on the duplicate template anyway. So that's what needs to be done. Surely there is another option, and that is we can use F12, use the coverage tab, and look at the CSS and say to ourselves, okay, the grouping of CSS and JavaScript is one thing, but what else can we do? Can we further optimize it? In this example, 70%, well, 74.8% is not used. Here we can't see the color code. Why? Because it's minified. Make sense? It's a minified version. We can see things that's color coded when the things are not minified. Okay, let me show you this example to see if we can see non-minified CSS, so that we see that's minified, that's not minified. So now you can see when the code is not minified, the Google Chrome developer toolbar gives us hints as to say this is not used on a desktop view, but surely we can test things to see, okay, how about mobile view? Is the CSS used then? If not, then we can identify what they are, remove them. Because this is just a developer toolbar, it's not updating the live site. Once we identify what's used, what's not used, then we can get rid of what's not used. And comments, I know they are tiny in terms of optimization gains. So let's put that up more. There's two more declarations. Let's remove them. Let's remove that. There's some IDs here that's not being used. But surely, after doing this, you do the test to say, okay, is the site working in terms of its styles? Make sense? So now, let's copy this. So this is just an example, because this is another level of technical optimization of a CSS for a Shopify store coming from your theme files. Because as you explore the assets folder, you will see many different JavaScripts, as we can see, and many different CSS files that's being called. Now, where they are called, that will depend on the theme that you're using. So then, what you can do is pull your sleeves up and identify what is loaded where. Because homepage may load different things to a collections URL. So now you need to test the collections URL accordingly to see what CSS is called, which CSS declarations are being used. For product URLs, since it's a Shopify store, this is a great URL to triple check everything. Because when you remove certain declarations from a CSS file, you need to test all different parts of a Shopify store. Because certain parts may use different declarations. So if we remove things thinking, okay, our homepage doesn't need that CSS declaration, and yet product URLs did need it, for example. And if so, then you need to check that, or else product URLs may break. So you would do the same test on different parts of any website, whether it's Shopify, WordPress, and so on, okay? So same optimization techniques has to be followed. Then once you identify, you need to explore the templates. You don't want to touch the JSON files unless you're an expert developer who knows how to create new ones or make changes there. Because the way the Shopify system works, as we can see, in these templates, collections.js is connected to the way the collection parts of Shopify work. But this particular collection.js, its type is this main collection banner. That's the section. So then we can say, okay, let's look at sections. Main collection banner, let's go and find that, which is this one. Make sense? So one part calls another part may call another part, and so on. To truly optimize the Shopify store, we need to explore all this, and that's going to take time, resources, and so on. But this is an advanced video tutorial. So then what else we can do? Let me show you conditional tags. Shopify theme Liquid or Liquid template system gives you, conditional logics, right? So we've looked at that. This is a great resource. You can perhaps quickly analyze things here. But let's imagine you say to yourself, okay, you know what? I've identified certain CSS or JavaScript files that I want to call on product URLs, but I don't want to call the same JavaScript in the front page, for example. Well, then you have these special tags that you can use. Okay, so we've got if request page type is a product page type. Where is the page type coming from? It's coming from somewhere here, right? So I'm not going to cover that. Product URL contains perhaps a sample product. Then you can perhaps run certain scripts then, or call certain CSS files then. Collection URL contains, let's say, test. Surely that's a silly example, but it gives you an example as to what else is possible. Because when we want to truly optimize a Shopify store, you will need to understand how these work. Let's imagine blog URLs. You may say, okay, you know what? Certain CSS and JavaScript, I don't need it for my blog posts, because that's a different section. As in, that's a different ball game altogether. Your blog posts are different. The way they look different. Let's preview the blog post. As you can see, that's rendered different. Also, let's imagine the typical Shopify theme asking for subscribe to our newsletter on a product URL, which when you think about it is not smart to have. Because if you want to sell a product on this product URL, then you want people to press add to cart. Make sense? You don't want to distract them with things that is not needed. So then perhaps the newsletter for the product URLs can be removed. Make sense? So how do we then do that? Let's go back to our theme. I'll show you that. Let's edit the test so that we don't make mistakes. So now we need to find out where the newsletter is called from. It's somewhere here, whether it's in sections, whether it's in code snippets, and so on. And then perhaps run conditional tags and load the newsletter section on different parts of a Shopify store. Make sense? Because that's how you need to think of search engine optimization of a Shopify store or any website. Meaning everything placed on any URL has to serve a purpose. Just because the pre-built theme places sign up newsletter everywhere doesn't mean it should be placed everywhere. Because for that section to work, for newsletter sign up section, there's a lot of scripts and CSS files that's being called. Furthermore, it distracts the purpose of conversions. Okay, so I'm going to make these available. If not, you can definitely read more about the tags in Liquid Reference, right? Or different parts of internet. You'll find great resources. But you can use regular expressions, which are very complex if you're not familiar with it. But if you are, then it's great, because then you can be as complex as you want. Let's imagine product variants. If your products have variants and you want to avoid certain Search Console errors, then perhaps you can use regular expressions to say, you know what, if handle contains whatever the page handle, let's imagine this scenario. Let me give you this example. If collection URL contains whatever the keyword you use in your Shopify store, and because this is an if statement, if and page URL contains product with a question mark, some search query pattern for the variants, then you can perhaps run a no index tag and place that in the head portion of your Shopify theme, right? So you can do that. Or you can find, you can run tests like this. You can place them in HTML comments to find out, let's say, what else we can do. You can assign page URL and grab the request path and work on that, because now you can assign variables. So there is a lot to be done, and it will require time, resources, and your skills to be truly optimizing a Shopify store. But these have to be done. We can run if else statement if we want. We can run if and let's also chuck in an else statement. Okay, let's remove the do this, or let's say do this. Robots directives do come up, so we don't need to use that per se. But what I'm saying here, you can run conditional tags and blurt out JavaScript accordingly, or blurt out CSS files accordingly. Move things from the head portion of HTML, place them in footer portion of your HTML. One way or another, you need to dive deeper into the way Shopify themes work. Once again, everything is tied to everything else. It just branches out. It's just a matter of identifying what is loaded, where it's loaded, and above all else, it's the apps. You need to be very, very thoughtful before you start using apps. Because most app developers, they don't understand search engine optimization or best coding practices. For any Shopify store, focus on usability. In this example, this particular website performs very bad. In fact, if they don't optimize this, then Google will not bring any free website traffic. Text can't be read, the colors are bad, the font sizes are terrible. All these are part of improving the usability of a website. Okay, in the previous video session, I've touched base with basics of optimization of a Shopify store. In this video session, I know I've talked a little bit fast, but nonetheless, there is a lot to cover. And perhaps I've covered just the tip of the iceberg, so to speak, because we can go actually deeper. But if you optimize what I've shown to you thus far, then I promise you, your Shopify store will perform better, both in terms of Google rankings as well as website conversions, because they are both tied together. I thank you for learning with Rankia. Before I close up, definitely check out the latest courses, particularly SEO for the Future, whereby I share great insights without going too deep into technical side of it, and yet you'll still be able to achieve great results. Once again, I'll talk with you in the next video session.